folks, welcome back to My Kitten Reads. I am Eleanor and this is my June reading wrap up for 2023 in which I read 11 books. All of which I have physical copies of, although a couple of them I did read as audiobook. But yes, I did read 11 books, mostly because after I was sick at the start of the month, I suddenly realised I was like 10 books behind schedule for my goal for the year, or which is like an entire month's worth of reading. So I didn't want to get any further behind. I read enough that I think I'm now like 7 books behind schedule. Because I obviously didn't read in the first week or two because I was not well. But yes, I read 11 things. Most of which are rereads, and most of which are not actually helpful for the rest of my other goals for the year. But at least I am not getting further behind on my total overall reading goal. So what did I read? An awful lot of Agatha Christie as I continued and finished my Miss Marple reread. So the first thing I finished was They Do It With Mirrors, which is in this collection of 3 Agatha Christie novels. I get most of my Agatha Christie secondhand, which means sometimes when I'm looking for a specific novel, they come in these like omnibus editions. But I read They Do It With Mirrors, which is about basically an old school friend of Miss Marple's asks her to check in on her sister because she feels that something's just not right with Carrie Louise. And yes, there are various threats around Carrie Louise. So there was that one. And then I finished A Pocket Full of Rye, which I actually quite enjoy. This one is essentially about a man who is poisoned in and dies in his office. And then things go even further from there. And Miss Marple gets involved because she trained the maid who passes away. And she's very concerned about what happened to Gladys. So she figures things out. Then I actually moved away from Miss Marple for a bit and I read off my actual to be read pile, Fugitive Telemetry by Martha Wells. This is the fifth book or 6th book. The novella that comes after the novel in the Murderbot Diaries. So this goes on my list for, having read at least one book with a queer character in that Murderbot has no gender. Murderbot is a gender because Murderbot is a robot human hybrid sort of thing. Anyway, yes. So this is essentially Murderbot does Law and Order. So it's on a station where they are safe and hanging out with their sort of guardians, and there is a random person murdered, and so the guardian offers Murderbot's skills to the local constabulary to try and figure out what's happening. So it's essentially it's very much in the end not connected to the rest of what's happened in Murderbot, but it's Murderbot investigates basically. So that was fun. Then I read another Miss Marple, which was the 450 from Paddington, which is in this large omnibus. So I quite enjoy 450 from Paddington, in which Mrs. McGillicuddy, who's a friend of Jane Marple's, is on her way to visit her and on a train and witnesses a woman being strangled in the train that is next to her train. But the authorities don't really believe her and they don't find a body. And so Miss Marple, who is getting a little frail, so can't really do field work herself, engages Lucy Islesborough, an acquaintance of hers, to investigate on her behalf. So that's fun. Then I finally finished reading this poetry collection. So I do apologise if I butcher the title because I do not speak this language. This is one of the Western Australian languages, but it's Ganjungu Yagu, something like that, by Charmaine Patok Green. So this is a poetry collection based around letters that her mother wrote her when she was a girl and had gone away to school in Perth. So it's very nostalgic, but it also delves into not only her memories, but what she now knows about her memories as an adult, and and deals with things like the experiences of Indigenous people in institutions, Indigenous people's very difficult relationship with colonial bureaucracy and paperwork and stuff like that. So that was excellent, and is of course at least one book I read this month that was by an author who is not white. So, you know, not great, but I at least got one of each of my diversity goals read. Given that how little I have been reading, that is handy. And then I went back to reading Miss Marple. So I read The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side, essentially. This edition is from the Angela Lansbury movie, which I haven't seen. But this one is when a film star has bought and renovated the old mansion at Miss Marple's village. And then, oddly enough, a local woman who lives in the new development and is, you know, one of those big fussy charitable women who is very narrow viewpoint and doesn't quite understand how what she says and does affects other people, is poisoned at the reception at the old mansion during a fete. And so Miss Marple is investigating. Then I read Caribbean Mystery, which is in another one of these volumes, which is when her nephew has sent her to Jamaica, I think, or St. Donaire, one of the Caribbean, at least the West Indies, for her health, for the summer, for the winter, sorry. And then a gentleman is an old colonel is telling her a story about a murderer and is going to show her a picture of the murderer, suddenly changes his mind, stuffs the picture away, and then he happens to die that night. And Miss Marple is suspicious. And Miss Marple is right to be suspicious. And she ends up teaming up with a Mr. Raphael, who is an elderly disabled person who is a businessman, and they end up teaming up together to solve things and try and prevent another murder. Unfortunately, there are a couple of other murders, but they do prevent one. And then I read At Bertram's Hotel by Agatha Christie again. So this one, Miss Marple goes to stay at Bertram's Hotel, which is suspiciously similar to what it was when she was a girl. And it turns out there's a whole kind of criminal network, family shenanigans going on, and then the doorman is shot on a foggy night. And then I read Nemesis, which goes back to her acquaintanceship with Mr. Raphael, except Mr. Raphael has passed away, but he has left her a legacy if she will undertake a project for him. He does not provide her with very much information, but there's a situation that he knows about that he wants her to get justice for. So she is sent off on a coach tour to see what she can find. Then on audio, I re-listened to The 13 Problems, which is one of my favourite books, and is a collection of 13 short stories, sort of interconnected, in which essentially Miss Marple has guests for dinner, including her nephew, who proposes that they should form a little club and each tell a problem that they have knowledge of the solution for, to sharpen their wits on, to see who can guess right. And Miss Marple beats them every time. And then it happens again at another dinner, and Miss Marple always gets it right. And then the final story is Miss Marple knows who has committed a murder, but she has no proof. And so she gets Sir Henry Clithering, who is the former Commissioner of Scotland Yard, who is staying in the area, and knows how clever she is, to investigate on her behalf. So that is The 13 Problems. Then the final thing I finished for the month, was my audio reread of The Bloody Chamber and Other Stories by Angela Carter. I picked this up because A, it's really, really good, and B, I was studying it last semester, and in fact I wrote an essay on it, on one of the stories. And also the audiobook version that I have, I can't remember who it alternates short stories with male and female reader, and I can't remember off the top of my head who the female reader is, but the male reader is Richard, what's his last name? The guy who played Thorin in the Hobbit films. Richard, can't remember. But so really nice voice. Really nice voice. So really excellent. Really liked re-listening to that. And that was what I read in June. So hopefully I can also read a similar number of books in July. I haven't actually really started. I've sort of started bits and pieces. I picked up one of my I'm still in the mood for mysteries, so I've kind of started reading one ebook mystery, rereading, and I also picked up a Friday Fisher audiobook just off a whim, so I'm reading something. But yeah, I really need to get buckling under and reading some other things that are not mysteries and finishing some other things off. But that is what I read in June. So while not necessarily brilliant for some of my goals for the year, it's at least put me back on track a little bit for my overall reading for the year. So yeah, and rereading Miss Marple has been a very fun experience. So always happy to talk about these books in the comments. Leave me a like or a subscribe, and I will see you all again really soon. Bye.